I mean, was it okay, this experience? No, but you're okay now. And you learned from this, you grew from this. And I can be there with my dad too and say, God, Dad, I feel the stress that you're going through. Now growing into a man myself, I understand how not every day is a cupcake, days are tough. And on those tough days, you got a screaming kid and you might react in a manner that is not appropriate. It's not to excuse that sort of behavior, but it's also to understand where he was coming from. And so going back there and being there with my younger self and being there with the younger version of my dad and having that conversation with my younger self and my dad at that point can help bring me solace in this moment right now so that I'm less afraid. But that's taking responsibility for your thoughts and how your thoughts are predicated upon your past. Welcome to the Weekly Transit, your guide to understanding the current planetary and astral alignments. Together, we'll explore how to harness these cosmic frequencies, empowering you to reach your highest potential as you navigate the days ahead. I'm your host, Scott Tajarian. Welcome to the Weekly Transit. This is the week of January 20th to the 26th. I'm your host, Scott Tajarian. There's no planets transiting into new signs this week. No full moon, no new moon. But there's 10 transits that we're going to cover. And this is a week where I feel like we're going to be able to kind of settle in, hopefully, to all of the new frequencies that we have been bombarded with over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You had Mercury transiting into Capricorn, Venus transiting into Pisces, the North Node transiting into Pisces, Mars transiting retrograde into Cancer. There was a lot of shifting going on the first few weeks of the year. And this is the week where, we're going to kind of work and play with these planetary frequencies and get used to them. They're here. We're going to work with them now. It was a little shocking at first, but now we're going to figure it out. I also forgot to mention the sun just transited into Aquarius on January 19th. So there's a lot to get into, 10 transits, and we're going to break them all down and how to work with these planetary energies to support you through the week ahead. I also want to talk about Mel Gibson before I get into the transits, because Mel Gibson came into my field this week. A couple clients had brought him up to me because he was one of the fire victims. He lost his home in the most recent fires. And of course, condolences to everyone who's suffering out there and has lost a home, lost property, or is displaced because they can't get back to their home. It's a lot. I can only imagine. And I am directly connected to it through family that have been displaced. But yeah, I was just thinking about Mel Gibson because he was brought up to me, and he was on one of the recent Joe Rogan podcast episodes, where when he was on the episode is when they was recording the episode, the fires were occurring. And so I was like, okay, so I listened to this episode. I wanted to hear this conversation. Mel Gibson is somebody who's always been very interesting to me. And it makes sense because we have very strong astrological synastry. So I can see, obviously he doesn't know me, but I can see why I have always been so curious about him, or wanting to know about him, or feeling connected to him in some way. Understanding the astrology, his astrological code with mine, it makes sense to me. So he's an easy person for me to listen to and to digest, and I find that he's a very interesting person. He is very unique. His faith in his religion, which is a very specific type of Catholicism, which I'm not even educated enough to really describe what that is. But if you watch the Joe Rogan podcast, he gets into that a little bit. But, being in Hollywood and being of his stature in Hollywood, and to have such strong faith in his convictions is very inspiring. Very inspiring. So, but I did almost come into contact with Mel Gibson at one point in my life. It's kind of a funny story. I was working at a restaurant at a steakhouse in downtown LA. I'm going to guess and say that it was probably around 2017, 2018, right around then. And I remember going up to the front desk and looking at the reservations for the night, and I saw a name that was slated to be in my section, Richard Donner. And I'm like, Richard Donner? Wow, Richard Donner, is that the director? Because Richard Donner is a director. He passed away in 2021, who I really loved a lot of his films. The Goonies, Superman. Growing up, these were big films for me. And then, of course, Lethal Weapon, which was one of Mel Gibson's first big breakout films. And so I didn't know if it was like the Richard Donner or another person named Richard Donner, but the night goes on. My section really fills up. It gets busy. I have like 3 tables, 5 tables in the main dining room, but then I've got this private room as well, which really screwed me up. As like a Taurus rising, in these tense, stressful situations, I'm like a bull in a china shop. I'm going like 10 directions at once. I'm feeling overwhelmed. So much happening. It's like, it's really hard to take an order of 10, 12 people in a private dining room when you've got 5 other tables in the main dining room. And mind you, this is in the early part of the evening, where there's a show going on at the Disney concert hall, or some sort of, whether it's the Philharmonic or it's a play that, there's that whole section of downtown LA where you've got like the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, the Amundsen Theater, the Disney concert hall. There could be 3 different shows going on at once, and all these people are just flooding into the restaurant, and they need to be out by 6:30, but they want you to open their bottle of wine, and they don't want you to rush them. And it's like, it's so crazy. So I'm just feeling tense even thinking about it right now. So it was one of those kinds of nights. And as the night starts to really ramp up, I get sat at this table, and it's like, oh wow, this is Richard Donner. I recognize him. I see his face. He's with his wife, and man, I'm looking. I'm like, he died in 2021 at 91 years old. Like when I saw him in 2017, 2018, I wouldn't have imagined that he was in his 80s. He looked really good. So he's there with him and his wife, and they're in this booth, and they're sitting on the same side of the booth, and there's a spot for a third person. So he's here, his wife's in the middle, and this third person is here, and I would be in front of the table. So if I'm looking to my left, I see him. I'm looking forward, I see his wife. And then to the right is an empty seat. And he says, our friend is on his way. I'm going to order for all of us. He called ahead. He told me his order. He's in traffic, but just take all of our order. And okay, so where I'm looking at the third place where there's no one sitting there, that direction is where the private dining room is. So I am in the weeds, as they say in the restaurant business. And so like, I'm asking for help. I'm like, okay, I'm about to take an order in this private dining room, and I don't know when I'm coming out, because like when you're taking an order of 12 people, and somebody's like, well, can you tell me more about this? Or, what is on this? Is this ingredient in there? Can you ask the kitchen about it? It could take 10, 15 minutes to get an order, because you get that one person that's not going to say, I'll take the steak medium rare, that's going to have a whole monologue of questions that are just going to split my mind open. And so, yes, that's where I was. So somebody came into the dining room and said, hey, just wanted you to know that the third person sat down, but the food is down. Everything's good. I just checked on them. And so I was like, okay. So I'm finishing up the order in the private dining room. I go to the computer. I type in the order. Okay, now I've got a minute to go back and check on all my other tables. And so I go over to the Richard Donner table, and I see that there's a third person sitting there, but I don't walk in front of the table. I stand to the side of the table because I'm trying to really conserve my steps. I've got a lot of people to talk to right now, and I just don't have it in me to walk in front of the table. So I stop short of the table. I make contact with Richard Donner, and I say, how's everything, sir? Can I bring you anything? He's like, no, we're good. Thank you so much. Very gracious, very chill. And I walk away. And then I go back into the dining room table, or into the private dining room, and they're starting to get their appetizers, so on and so forth. And then I come out, and one of my friends says, hey, that was really cool that Mel Gibson was in your section. I was like, Mel Gibson was in my section? He's like, yeah. He's like, he's at table 15. I'm like, what? Like, oh my God, he was the third person who was there. And by that time, I go back over, and it's just Richard Donner and his wife. He's like, yeah, our friend had to leave. He had a play to go to, so he just ate and ran. I was like, oh my God, that was Mel Gibson sitting there. I was right on his back talking to Richard Donner. Didn't see his face because I didn't walk around to the full table, which is probably good, because I would have been starstruck otherwise, and then I would have been like even more in the weeds. So that was my almost interaction with Mel Gibson. But he's a very fascinating individual to me, and listening to the podcast with Joe Rogan, it just made me even more fascinated. Like, I literally opened up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 tabs on the internet from different things that they were mentioning, books, medicine. It's like, he's a very intellectual person, and it makes sense because he was born with the sun in the 6th house, which is ruled by Mercury. This is associated with the 6th sign, which is Virgo. Virgo is ruled by Mercury, so the 6th house is ruled by Mercury. His dad, Mel Gibson's dad, is a Virgo. He talks about how intellectual he was. I didn't realize, but I looked it up. It's true. And he mentioned it on the podcast. He's like, yeah, my dad won Jeopardy in 1968. And then he came back and beat all the other Jeopardy winners for the season and won like the grand championship for the year. I'm like, wow. So his dad, very intellectual as well. Virgo sun. Mel Gibson is a Capricorn sun, but a 6th house sun, which is associated with the 6th sign, which is Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury. And he really is somebody who I'm bringing him up because I feel like he's a great example for any of you listeners out there to view somebody who's really living in his North Node frequency, because he just is. Just hearing him talk, and I'm going to get into the North Node in a second, but I just want to point out a couple other parts of his chart that really stand out to me. First of all, like, he talks to Joe Rogan a lot about history and all these historical books. And, he did The Passion of the Christ, and he did Apocalypto and Braveheart, all these historical films. He does The Patriot. He really loves history, and it makes sense because he was born with Cancer rising along the horizon, and Cancer is ruled by the moon, and the moon represents the past because the light that's reflecting off of the moon is past light. So the moon represents the past. The moon rules Cancer. And Mel Gibson is a Cancer rising, which means the essence of his soul is Cancer, which would be why he has this interest in the past. He's also born with the moon in the fourth house. The fourth sign is Cancer, so the fourth house is associated with Cancer. Therefore, Mel Gibson's moon is in the house that it rules. It's in a position of power because it's in the house that it rules. So that also brings a strong connection to his home. And so, losing his home, I'm sure it means so much more to him than he's letting on, just from what I've read in online and how he's responding to it. It's just stuff, this and that, but there's a lot of stuff. Is like my whole lifetime of photos and memorabilia over time. And so I believe he has a really strong connection to his home, strong connection to the past. And it's what makes him so sensitive. I think that people don't realize how sensitive Mel Gibson is. And he's very impressionable because of that sensitivity. That is, you can really see it in his eyes. His eyes, I feel like they carry a lot because he's very open. And so he has to protect his energy. He has to protect his if you're a Cancer rising, he lived by the ocean. The crab lives by the ocean. So, Cancer rising, you're supported by water. You're supported by crystals that are going to help transmute negative energies around you. Now, he also has that very grounded nature to his auric field, his persona, because he's a Capricorn sun, and it's a sixth house Capricorn sun. As we said before, the sun in the sixth house. The sixth house is associated with Virgo, the sixth sign. Virgo's mutable earth, Capricorn's cardinal earth. So this is why he is a very grounded individual. He's very practical. He's very pragmatic. He likes researching. He likes looking for, he really values what he can see, taste, touch, or feel, and what that experience is within himself. He was born with the moon in Libra. I feel like this is why he's such a great interview. Libra moons are very conversational. They're emotionally fulfilled by being in conversation, being in relationship with other people. And so sitting across from Joe Rogan, I should look at Joe Rogan's chart too. Let me pull that up real quick, because if I'm going to talk about him, then I need to make sure that he is referenced. And Joe Rogan is a Taurus rising. Like me, Joe Rogan is a Leo sun and also a Libra moon. So this is why I typically, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. Like, people think, oh, you don't listen to podcasts? I'm like, no, I'm too busy working on my own podcasts and editing my own podcast. Maybe when I have a team of people working for me, editing and producing my podcast, and I'll have time to listen to other people. But really, I have to also keep my sort of field clear. I can't have too much mental clutter. Then I lose space in terms of what I'm attempting to channel through and communicate. Now, of course, that's not for everyone. If you have those Gemini frequencies, if you have those air placements, then you're probably somebody who loves hearing the conversations of others. And so, but Joe Rogan and Mel Gibson, they're both Libra moons. And I feel like this is why Joe Rogan has been so successful with his podcast, is because Libra, I see this in so many Libra moons. They are such great communicators. They're climbers. They're social climbers, and not to say it in a way that like they're sitting back and thinking like, how can I ascend and climb up the ladder of society? No, they're just people that are naturally emotionally attuned to others and fairness and really listening to others and understanding what it's like to be in the other person's shoes. And because of that, they endear themselves to others, and others say, you know what? This is a fair-minded individual. I like them. I want to work with them. I want to elevate them in some way. And Joe Rogan and Mel Gibson, for as knowledgeable as they are, they're also very open about what they don't know. I mean, there are multiple times in the episode where Joe Rogan's like, have you heard of this person? Mel Gibson's like, no, I haven't. Like, who is that? Like, tell me about this. And then Mel Gibson's like, well, have you heard about this person? Joe Rogan's like, no, I haven't heard it. Like, who's that? Tell me. So they're open, they're exchanging ideas, and it's a really easy, free-flowing conversation, easy to listen to. So, but Mel Gibson, he talks about how he is working on his latest project, which is the Resurrection of the Christ, which is like the sequel for the Passion of the Christ. And I only saw the Passion of the Christ once, and it was super intense. I wasn't a huge fan of the film, but because it just felt really kind of like, I don't know, it was just Jesus getting his ass kicked for 2 hours or 3 hours, however long the film was. I should go back and watch it again and see if I have a different experience. But, growing up in a religious household, growing up Christian, I really just have a lot of respect for Mel Gibson and how he is able to hold so strongly to his faith, because I know it can be really difficult out there in the secular world. But, that's part of his mission in terms of his midheaven, which is in Pisces. So it's interesting because he is achieving his goals and ambitions, not just through his faith and that faith. He talks a lot about faith in his interview with Joe Rogan, which I thought was very interesting and appropriate for the time that we're in, because if you've listened to the last few podcasts that I've done here, we're talking about faith a lot. Because all these planets, 3 planets in Pisces, the North Node in Pisces, this is a time where we got to cling to something, and there might not be anything to cling to. And for Mel Gibson, this is a crisis of faith for him. He lost his home. So what do you do when you lose your home and you have nothing left? I mean, I'm sure he has other possessions. He probably has other homes. But it's still, he lost a lot, I imagine. So, but you've got to connect to that higher power, seeing the bigger picture. There's also Pisces is film, because film draws us into the unconscious. And Mel Gibson is a dream worker. He's a storyteller. And so he has this capacity through the sensitivity of his Cancer rising, through the focused attention of his 6th house sun, which is that Virgo frequency, and the willingness to do the work. He said he worked on this script for the resurrection of the Christ with his brother and their writing partner, Randall Wallace, who wrote Braveheart for 8 years. They've been working on this script. And now he's figuring out the pre-production and how he's going to direct it. And he's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to, to succeed, to do it, if it's going to be, if I can even get it done, but he's like, I got to try, right? Because you got to see what you can do. And that's that Capricorn frequency of, I don't know if I can climb the mountain, but the mountain's there. So I might as well try to climb the mountain. But it's interesting because his progressed sun is at the final 2 degrees of the 9th house. And it really feels like he's coming to this term over the next 3 years, because in about 3 years is when his progressed sun is going to move into the 10th house. So over the next 3 years is going to be moving closer and closer and closer to his midheaven, which indicates that this is a time for great achievement for him. It was also interesting that Mel Gibson And Joe Rogan, they're talking a lot about health and age, and Mel Gibson's talking about how his body is breaking down. He's like, it really started around age 58. That's when I first noticed that my body was breaking down and wasn't the same anymore. And Joe Rogan's like, he's like, how old are you? And Joe Rogan's like 57. He's like, uh-oh. He's but 58 is the second Saturn return. It's the second Saturn return. So of course, age 58, you have this shift in how you're experiencing life on Earth. Mel Gibson talks about how he is in his third act. Well, he's in the third period before his third Saturn return. He's like, Joe Rogan, you're in your second act. Well, Joe Rogan's second act is about to end, because when you hit that second Saturn return, that's when you move into the third act. So interesting to just listen and hear what they're sharing and seeing how this is reflecting in their astrological codes. But back to Mel Gibson's North Node and him following his North Node. So he was born with the North Node in Sagittarius in the 6th house. And Sagittarius is the sign of faith. It's ruled by Jupiter, the planet of luck and expansion. When I think of the archer, the symbol for Sagittarius, I think of Robin Hood. And who's Robin Hood's best friend? Friar Tuck. So the fact that Mel Gibson is so religious and so philosophical, he's not as dogmatic as you would think. He's very open-minded. He talks about how he had this Chinese healer who I couldn't understand what he was saying, the type of healer he was, but he's like, the guy would just look at you and point at you, and you would go back. It would push you back. Like, he wouldn't even have to touch you, and you would feel his energy. And he lifted me 8 inches off the ground, he says one time, by not touching me. And he's like, and I went to my priest. I'm like, is this okay? Like, or is this demonic? And the priest was like, were you healed? And he's like, yes. He's like, then it's okay. So he's doing something to you that's positive. So it's all good. But he's really tapping into that faith with the Sagittarius frequency. I also think about the fact that he lives in the United States. He was born here, but he was raised in Australia. I think he also maybe has a place in Australia too. He's definitely like a global citizen. And that's Sagittarius, because Robin Hood is the traveler. So Mel Gibson is traveling. He's exploring. He's expanding his mind. He's deepening his philosophical view. He's speaking his truth, even when it's unpopular, even when people are really putting him down for his beliefs. He's like, well, this is how I see it. And that's Sagittarius. That's Sagittarius North Node. That's him really being in that frequency. Now, the 6th house frequency is that researcher part of him, where he's Joe Rogan is saying, did you have a biblical scholar that's helping you? He's like, of course, he got a biblical scholar, and talks about like when he was filming Apocalypto, which is a film about the Mayan culture. It's all in a foreign language. He's like, yes, we had historians and researchers and all these people here, to help inform the story. So he's very well read. He's always looking to receive new knowledge and do that research. And he's very diligent. He's very detail oriented. I don't think that you can be a director of films and not be detail oriented. So he's really that interesting juxtaposition of being able to see the big picture and have faith, but also boil it down to the details. So I hope this is helpful. I hope this gives you some insight into yourself as well as Mel Gibson. And of course, as we continue on with the weekly transit, I will, as other people come into my field, I will be talking about them as well, people from the public realm. And I hope you've been enjoying the episodes that I've been putting out with regular folks that are extraordinary people, like Ricky King, who I interviewed a couple weeks ago, and then Drew Marish this past week that I interviewed. Both of them have fascinating, interesting stories. Drew lost his son to a motorcycle accident. So he has a podcast called Unpacking Grief, which he does to share how he has dealt and continues to deal with the grief of losing his son. Ricky was very open about the loss of her brother to a serial killer back in 1980. So, how does somebody go through the loss of their son? How does somebody go through the loss of their sibling to a serial killer and continue to live? I mean, it's truly inspiring how both of these individuals have rebuilt their lives and continue to thrive in living. They're an inspiration to me, and I hope that by listening to what they share on the podcast, they are an inspiration to you as well. This coming week, I'm going to be releasing an episode with Ace, Alicia Easter, who also, she lost her mom when she was 18, 19 years old, a freshman in college. And, her dad was out of the picture. He was never in the picture. And so losing her mother at 19, freshman in college, like, how does somebody deal with that? And she's thriving in life. So I'm bringing these individuals on because they're not celebrities like Mel Gibson, but it doesn't mean that, or Joe Rogan, but it doesn't mean that their stories have any less value. I feel like this period over the next 20 years with Pluto and Aquarius, it's going to be the rise of the common man and just normal folks like Ricky King or Drew Marish or Alicia Easter, that they're normal folks because they're not huge celebrities, but they have extraordinary stories and they're living extraordinary lives that are worth sharing with a wider audience. And so that's why I'm bringing them on. And I've got a lot more that I've recorded and that I'm going to be recording that I'm going to be sharing with you. And I'm really excited about it because I'm loving talking to these individuals, hearing their stories, and reflecting from an astrological perspective. There's one other thing that I wanted to mention in regards to this, but now I'm losing my train of thought. So it'll come back to me or not, but let's just move into the week and see how things are. So this week is about compassionate community, because we've got all these planets. Venus, the planet that's, you know what I was going to say? Okay, I'll go back to it. So it was my thought on Aquarius and Pluto and Aquarius. It's really fascinating to me when you look at the history, modern history, and when did celebrity become celebrity? Like, celebrity is such a thing. When did that happen? How did that happen? It wasn't always that way. Like, years and years and years ago, say even 100 years ago, in the 1920s, who were the celebrities then? They weren't celebrities like we have now. I mean, really the most famous people in the world were the kings and queens. Actors, writers, musicians, comedians, those were singers. Those people weren't world famous. They did not have fame like the actors, writers, and directors and musicians and rock stars have now. So when did that happen? How did that happen? Well, it's quite plain and simple to see when you look at it from an astrological perspective. The sign that rules fame is Leo, because Leo is the sun, ruled by the sun. It's symbolized by the lion. The lion is the creature that everybody wants to see when they go to the zoo. They go to the circus. They go to Africa. They want to see the lion. The lion. So the lion is the most famous animal that there is. So Leo represents fame. Well, from 1937 to 1957, Pluto was transiting through Leo. Pluto was transiting through Leo from 1937 to 1957. And the first celebrity that, first person that I can think of where it's like, oh, yeah, this is when this person, their fame still endures long after they have died. And what were they called? The King. Elvis Presley. The King. That's his name. Elvis Presley, and then you could say Marilyn Monroe. Those were the first two huge celebrities. And when did they become really popular? The 1950s, at the tail end of Pluto's transit through Leo. So, as we move forward with Pluto's transit through Aquarius, I would imagine that by the time we get to the 2040s, that's when the celebrity as we know it now is going to be undone or rewritten or not what it was, how it is now. And really, the people that are going to be most recognized are the average Joe and Jane, just normal folks. And so, yeah, just a thought. Curious to hear what you think of that. What's interesting also is, so 1937 and 1957, everybody born during that period was born with Pluto in Leo. And so there, that 20-year period, they ushered in all these Pluto in Leo people ushered in this period of celebrity, where now, like, celebrity is such a huge thing. That was the tidal wave of celebrity. When you think about presidents, Bill Clinton was born with Pluto in Leo. George Bush, Pluto in Leo. Joe Biden, Pluto in Leo. Donald Trump, Pluto in Leo. It's like this generation of people, they love to have that center of attention. And so, just something to think about. It's interesting. It's interesting to me. Let me know if that's interesting to you. Now, looking ahead at the week. So we were talking about Pisces. That's the compassionate community. Pisces. So you've got Venus, which is exalted in Pisces. So it's in a position of power. Venus is the planet of relationships. It's in a position of power because if you're in a relationship with somebody and in order for the relationship to be supportive, you have to be empathetic. You have to be empathetic for what they're feeling. On the flip side, you also don't want to give too much. There's stronger empathy in terms of our relationships, but you don't want to bend over backwards. That's one of the threats here in Los Angeles post fires is everybody wants to give, and that's great. That's wonderful. It's amazing to see how compassionate and empathetic people in this city of angels are. But it's also important to make sure that your cup is filled before you're trying to fill the cup of another. You don't want to give your last dollar to somebody who doesn't have a dollar, So it's important that we're really taking care of ourselves. And sometimes it's okay if all you can give is not being a burden to anyone else. There's also Saturn in Pisces, the planet of restriction, responsibility, hard work, achievement, authority in Pisces. This is urging us to take responsibility for what it means to have faith. And taking responsibility for what it means to have faith means that you need to take responsibility to delve within your unconscious, face your psychological baggage, the guilt, the shame, the regret, the blame. Like if you're one of these people that you feel like you need to give, are you giving it because you really want to, or are you feeling guilty because you have a house and somebody else doesn't? What is going on in your psyche right now? Really pay attention to guilt. Like I think about the people, like my sister says she can count on one hand the number of friends she has in the Palisades that still have a home. So, and that's where she lives. So she has a lot of friends that have lost everything. And I can only imagine, putting myself in that situation, like, what do you grab? And you go back, there's nothing there. You're going to start thinking about different things that, oh God, how did I forget this? That should have been the first thing that I grabbed, And so there might be some guilt about not taking what you wish you would have taken, but you didn't take it because you were in a rush because there was a fire coming. There's also guilt around my house is still here and somebody else's house is not here. There's a satellite image on the internet from the fires, and you can go and you can zoom into all of the Palisades. I haven't seen Altadena, but the Palisades, there's this one section of the Palisades where it's like in this flatland area where literally almost every single home is gone. But in a couple instances, there's like one house there. There's 100 houses gone, but one house is still there. And it's like, that person might feel guilty that like, I still have my home and all my neighbors don't. But what is that for you? You don't live in Los Angeles. You're on the other side of the world. What does this have to do with me, Scott? Well, what do you feel guilty about? What do you feel ashamed of? What are you regretting? What's happening in your life? We're all experiencing that in some way with Saturn in Pisces. And then there's Neptune in Pisces, the planetary ruler of Pisces, which is creating a lot of confusion because who knows what to believe about anything. It's part of the fun of social media is all the different theories of how the fire started. Was it planned? Who's responsible? Is it climate change? Is it a nefarious power? I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I have the answer because I don't have the answer. But I do have faith that whatever needs to occur is going to occur, and whatever occurs is going to be in my highest good and in the highest good of all the other souls that are affected. That's faith. And that's what we want to tap into here. Because answers, there's not a lot of clarity. You've got Jupiter in Gemini, which is bringing up a lot of questions, the planet of expansion in the sign of curiosity. And I certainly have a lot of questions. Why was the brush overgrown and not cleared? Why were the fire hydrants empty? Why was the reservoir empty? I've seen this reservoir in person over the last year. There's family that live in view of this reservoir. And I wasn't really sure of what it was, but I've been asking other people who live in this facility, what is that? And no one gave me a straight answer. Well, now I know because I looked on the map and I saw where it was. And I'm like, oh, there's a reservoir. And this is where my sister's mother-in-law lives. Okay, so that's what I've been looking at. It looked like a giant concrete crater in the earth, just empty, right by where the fires were. And we had record rainfall the last 2 years in Los Angeles. How come that wasn't filled up with water to support potential fires? These are all Just questions. I don't have the answer. I'm not saying that somebody's doing something on purpose. I don't know. But I do know that I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure a lot of other people have a lot of questions that need to be answered. And that's where community comes in, because of course, Pluto is in Aquarius, but the sun transited into Aquarius on Sunday, the day of the sun transited into Aquarius. And that's bringing light, life, and vitality to the fixed air sign, symbolized by the water bearer, that individual that invented the jug, not for themselves, but for the village, for the community. So this is bringing logic to that compassion to the community, but really helping us look at what is the answer here? Let's look at this logically. Let's look at this scientifically. Really scientifically, right? Yeah. So that's the work for this week. Now let's get into the details of the week. So the week begins with the sun. The sun, the giver of light, life, and vitality, transiting through the fixed air sign, symbolized by the water bearer, Aquarius, forms that conjunction with Pluto, the god of death, lord of the underworld, the planet of transformation. Pluto in Aquarius is opening things up. There's no hiding with Pluto in Aquarius. That's what's exhilarating about it. That's also what's horrifying about it. Because all of us are going to have to be in the public frame in some way, shape, or form over the next 20 years. I've talked about this before, but Aquarius is the sign that rules homosexuality. Because Venus is the goddess of love, and Uranus is Venus flipped upside down. So it's what makes your love different than the norm. And homosexuality is a love that is different from the norm. Therefore, Aquarius is the sign that rules homosexuality. And what is the phrase that is associated with homosexuality? Coming out of the closet. We are all going to have to come out of our collective closets and show the world who we are. And last year, on January 20th, the sun and Pluto both transited into Aquarius on the same day. This year, Pluto's a degree ahead now, so it takes the sun a day to catch up to Pluto. But this is something we're going to experience several times over the next 20 years. These conjunctions, and every time the sun forms a conjunction with Pluto in Aquarius, there's going to be some sort of transformation to the community. An awakening, an outing. Community is going to be outed in some way. Maybe leaders in the community are going to be outed. When you think about what happened the last time Pluto transited through Aquarius, it was the American and French revolutions. And a lot of the elite upper echelons were called to task. So there could be some more of that coming. But we want to be fair. We want to be fair. Lest you forget that Robespierre, the person who was leading the charge to decapitate the aristocracy, also died by the guillotine. So if you're out there and you're pointing a lot of fingers and you are, creating a lot of attention to disparage other people without also putting yourself forth and being open in who you are, then eventually the community may turn on you. Because This is about creating balance and equanimity within the community. Now, the sun forms this conjunction with Pluto in Aquarius from Sunday to Wednesday, January 19th to the 22nd, with the exact conjunction occurring on Tuesday, January 21st. Take a look at your astrological code. What is at around 1 degree in air, fire, or fixed signs? That is going to show where you are needing to come out. You are needing to show yourself, present yourself, be open in terms of who you are, what you're willing to contribute, and what you want in return from the community. The fire signs are Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. The air signs are Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. And the fixed signs, we've already mentioned 2 of them, Leo and Aquarius, but also Scorpio and Taurus. So especially if you were born with something in the early degrees of Scorpio or Taurus, you may experience an outing where you are not putting yourself out there, but somebody is pushing you out of the closet against your will. It may feel stressful, it may feel painful, but it's what needs to come to fruition so that you can see who you are. And sometimes the best way to see who you are is not your reflection in the mirror, but the reflection that you receive from the group around you. One of the things that Joe Rogan and Mel Gibson talked about, Joe Rogan brought this up. He's like, what people's greatest fear is? And I think he had some study. I totally believe it is true. It makes sense. Is public humiliation. Public humiliation. We want to be loved. We want to be accepted. And if you're put into the public and people are debasing you, that's humiliating. So I hope that anyone that's experiencing that or that's experienced public humiliation understand that you have been challenged at that point in your life to delve into the deepest parts of yourself and find love. Because ultimately, your role in this life is to learn to love yourself. And the more that you're loving yourself, the less guilty you feel, the less shameful you feel, the less regretful you feel, the less you're blaming yourself, the less you're blaming others, and the more that you're contributing in a meaningful, positive way to the collective. I've got 3 planets in Scorpio, and then my ascendant in Taurus. So I'm just like looking at those dates. I'm like, am I going to be outed in some way? What's happening to me? But I think the way that you mitigate that is by following your North Node, your soul's purpose. And so whenever you're feeling that tension, that stress, delve into your North Node frequency. And of course, if you're curious about learning more about your North Node frequency, your astrological code, or how these transits are affecting you, and how to best work with these energies to your benefit, then I encourage you to contact me for a reading at theweeklytransit.com. The second transit for the week also includes the sun, and this is also happening on Tuesday at 12:30 p.m., January 21st, where the sun squares off with the moon in Scorpio. So we've got that tension, that half moon. It's at 2 degrees in Scorpio with the sun at 2 degrees in Aquarius, the moon in Scorpio, the sun in Aquarius. Both are fixed. Aquarius is air. Scorpio is water. Water and air don't mix. That creates tension. They're both fixed. So, collectively, we're feeling something within our emotional nature, something deep within ourselves that we want to hide. We don't want people to know, but yet it's being pulled out. It's being pulled out in an uncomfortable way. So what secrets are you keeping from the group? Or what secrets is the group trying to learn about you? Are you feeling pressure from the group to reveal a part of yourself that you're like, I don't think anybody in the group needs to know that about me? If that's the case, then so be it. Protect yourself. I'm not saying you have to come out. You can stay in. That's up to you. Everybody is going to go through their own sort of experience. And unless I'm actually looking at your astrological code, I can't say one way or another. But I would just say that be aware of any hidden parts of yourself that are being drawn to the light and the discomfort that you're experiencing in that. That's Tuesday. That same day, Mercury in Capricorn forms a square to Chiron. Wow. Oh, I love how this all comes together. So you got Mercury in Capricorn squaring Chiron in Aries. Mercury is the messenger of the gods, guide of souls to the underworld, the planet of consciousness, communication, coordination, the god of merchants and thieves, transiting through the cardinal earth sign symbolized by the goat. Mel Gibson always has that. He has that nice beard, that thick beard. It's very Capricorn, but also Cancer. It's his protection. It's protecting. It's his shell. The goat is ascending to the top of the mountain. So Mercury transiting through Capricorn. We need to take responsibility for our thoughts. Squaring off with Chiron, the wound, and the ancient wisdom which is unlocked through healing that wound in the cardinal fire sign symbolized by the ram, Aries. This is at 19 degrees. Chiron has been at 19 degrees since November 11th, the day that Megan Fox announced to the world that she was pregnant with Machine Gun Kelly's baby. As it's been squaring her ascendant and her Mars. I talked about that a couple podcasts ago. It's going to be at 19 degrees until Valentine's Day, February 14th. But we get these little tinges here where a planet squares Chiron is like, oh, okay, I feel that. So what are we experiencing here? Well, this could be taking responsibility for your thoughts and the words that you're choosing to communicate, and you're realizing that, ooh, maybe I'm not as smart as I thought I was, or maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Where are you feeling insecurity when it comes to your relationship to authority or your relationship to yourself as the authority? Speaking from that position of authority. Like, should I even be speaking? Maybe I shouldn't be saying anything because I thought I knew what I was talking about, but now I don't. That could be coming up right now. And so this is happening from Sunday to Wednesday with the exact square happening January 21st. So January 19th to the 22nd. January 21st is the exact square. So as the moon is squaring the sun, and there's a part of our secret nature that is coming to light, part of that might be, I actually don't know what I'm talking about. I don't know anything. Oh my God, I'm an idiot. Okay, well, let's not take it that far. Let's have some humility, but let's encourage ourselves. Let's think about this. Why was I speaking out of turn? Oh, because I was afraid. I'm afraid. There's a lot of fear right now. When a fire can come and burn through 30, 40,000 acres in Los Angeles and burn thousands upon thousands of homes and displace over 100,000 people, that can really screw with your reality. It's like, oh my God, am I safe? Am I okay? And so sometimes the easiest thing to do is to say, somebody must have done this on purpose. Because if somebody didn't do it on purpose, then we're completely out of control. Then we're like totally screwed. It's like, wait, this just happened because of nature? Which I'm not saying it did or didn't. I don't know. But I find myself always wanting to jump to like, okay, somebody had to do this. Who's gaining? Where's the money going? But I go there because part of me is afraid that if it wasn't somebody, then it's completely out of our control. It's like somebody getting shot by a gun with no person firing the gun. It's like, well, if somebody can just get shot by a phantom gun, then there's nobody to punish. There's no recourse of you do this and you're punished. You do something wrong and there's a consequence. There's no consequence. You might just get shot for no reason. That's scary. When we can put a person to it, then we can have that sense of solace that says, oh, that person did it. And if it wasn't for that person, then all these houses wouldn't have burned. Then you can sleep a little easier at night. So what are those fears that are going on within you? How are you processing that? And how are these fears preventing you from truly taking responsibility for your thoughts? And how are they holding you back from planning in a way that is going to help you feel like you are in that position of authority, where you are somebody who is accomplished? Now, Mercury continues on through the week. It's very active this week. Literally, of the 10 transits we're talking about, 5 of them are Mercury. So half the transits are Mercury. So the second Mercury transit, the 4th transit of the week, Mercury in Capricorn opposes Mars retrograde in Cancer. Last week was the Sun in Capricorn opposing Mars retrograde in Capricorn. This week it's Mercury as Mercury catches up to the Sun. Cancer, that's cardinal water opposing Capricorn, cardinal earth. Cancer is ruled by the moon and symbolized by the crab, that sensitive creature with a soft inner core and a hard outer shell. Mars, the god of war, transiting through the sign that rules the home. It's interesting. I was talking to a couple of my younger cousins today, and they like meeting with me. I love that. That's my legacy to my family, is like any of my younger cousins who, want to talk to me about astrology and the esoteric world, like I invite them in. And so I've got a couple that are into it. And we were talking about how my sister's dog is reflecting one of my cousins, is Virgo moon, Aries, or Virgo sun, Aries moon. And I was like, yeah, I think he's 13. And I looked up his chart and I was like, okay, yeah, he's 13. And I looked and I was like, oh my God. He's in the middle of his Martian return. He was born with Mars at 26 degrees in Cancer. And he's been displaced in his home. So what is going on within your home? Obviously, most people didn't have their house burned down when you think about the entire world. But what's going on in your home? Is there conflict? Is there disruption? Is there construction going on next door? Are you renovating your house? It could be any of these sort of experiences with Mars transiting through Cancer But whatever you're going through, it's stirring up your past, your roots, your upbringing, your childhood, the ones who raised and nurtured you, your ancestors, your bloodline. And with Mercury opposing Mars, it's taking responsibility for your thoughts and how you process the past. It's about facing your fears and insecurities that are rooted in your past. Like when you think about Chiron in Aries and that insecurity, well, where do these insecurities stem from? When was the last time I felt this way? When was the first time I felt this way? You know, it's really quite simple for me. Like I think, okay, I feel unsafe because of the fires. When was the last time I felt unsafe? Okay, COVID. That felt like similar. This feels like COVID again. And the time before that, 9/11. 9/11. That's when I also, it's like the unexplainable, like my whole reality shifting. You know, but when's the first time I felt this way? Oh, yeah. The first time my dad laid his hands on me in an aggressive manner. That's when my reality shifted. When the stable person, the person that was giving me my stability, took that away from me. So I have to have the courage right now to go back into my past and to be there with my younger self and say, hey, little Scott, Mr. Bunny, that's what my parents would call me. It's okay. I mean, was it okay, this experience? No, but you're okay now. And you learned from this, you grew from this. And I can be there with my dad too and say, God, Dad, I feel the stress that you're going through. You know, now growing into a man myself, I understand how not every day is a cupcake, you know, days are tough. And on those tough days, you got a screaming kid and you might react in a manner that is not appropriate. It's not to excuse that sort of behavior, but it's also to understand where he was coming from. And so going back there and being there with my younger self and being there with the younger version of my dad and having that conversation with my younger self and my dad at that point can help bring me solace in this moment right now so that I'm less afraid. But that's taking responsibility for your thoughts and how your thoughts are predicated upon your past. Mercury, again, as Mercury continues its forward transit through Capricorn, it aligns in a trine with Uranus retrograde in Taurus. Uranus, the planet of revolution, rebellion, innovation, independence, the unexpected. Transiting retrograde through the fixed earth sign symbolized by the bull Taurus. Revolutionizing our self-worth and values. We talked about this in last week's episode because Uranus was forming a trine to the sun in Capricorn while forming a sextile to the moon in Cancer. Revolutionizing our self-worth and values, and through that, revolutionizing our goals and ambitions. As your self-worth and values are revolutionized, so too must your goals and ambitions and what you're spending your time on. If your values have changed, then what you spend your time on must change, must be revolutionized. This occurs from Wednesday to Friday, January 22nd to the 24th, with the exact trine occurring on Thursday, January 23rd. So what is being revolutionized in terms of your values? Go back to 2019. That's when Uranus transited into Taurus, and it's been there ever since. It was there for a bit the year prior, but it's been there consistently since 2019. And this year, it dips into Gemini before coming back into Taurus, before fully moving into Gemini in 26. So this is kind of our last push to continuing to revolutionize our self-worth and values. It's interesting going back to the Joe Rogan, Mel Gibson conversation. And Mel Gibson is talking about how the film industry has changed. And it's changed in that, when he did Braveheart, he got 3,000 extras on horses and he could take his time with things. He had a much bigger budget. He was on the show, Joe Rogan show, promoting his latest film that he directed with Mark Wahlberg in the starring role, Flight Risk. And he's like, I had 22 days. I had 22 days to shoot the film. So it's very different now. There's not the same amount of money. They want everything quicker, more efficiently. And this goes back to a conversation that I had offline with one of my friends who used to be an editor in the business. And he was talking about how Netflix just keeps pumping out film after. It doesn't matter if it's good. It doesn't matter at all. It's not about quality. They just want content. I was like, it's interesting you bring that up, because the last time Uranus was in Taurus, which was 1935 to 1942, it made me think about what is widely considered the greatest, if not one of the greatest, if not the greatest film of all time, which is the film Casablanca, which wasn't supposed to be a great film, let alone one of the greatest films of all time, if not the greatest film of all time, because it was just one of dozens of films that was being made every week. Back in the early 1940s, late 30s, early 40s, the film industry was making 500 to 600 films a year. Dozens of films every week were just being churned out. This is why you go to the grocery store and you're like, how come the shelves are empty again? Because the planet of revolution is in the sign that represents the material. So food and entertainment and cars and, all everything that is in the material is going through a revolution. And money is going through a revolution. So there's just not enough money to really do these big sort of passion projects in film. And we don't have the abundance and resources like we've had in the past. Perhaps that will change when Uranus transits into Gemini. It was in Gemini after World War II when we started to experience the boom in the economy. But the whole point of this is your self-worth and values are being revolutionized, because when you lose your home, I imagine you start to think differently about material items. What really does have value to me and what doesn't have value to me. And with the aspect to Mercury in Capricorn, it's helping us really think about prioritizing our values, prioritizing our relationship to the material, prioritizing our time in a manner that is reflective of how we value life in the material, which is very different than how we valued it in 2019, 2018, 2017. Mars, as it continues its retrograde, forms a sextile to Uranus retrograde in Taurus. So these three planets are dancing with each other through the middle part of the week. Mars forms its aspect to Uranus from Friday to Sunday. Last Friday, January 17th to Sunday, the 26th. So this is over a week period, with the exact sextile occurring on January 23rd. So from Friday, January 17th to Sunday, January 26th, Mars retrograde in Cancer is aligning with Uranus retrograde in Taurus. So as we're revolutionizing our self-worth and values, we're also taking an aggressive look at our past. Why do I value what I value? Where does that come from? Where does that stem from? Why is that important to me? Why does that matter? It comes from someplace. What's the story there? Is it because my dad liked this or my mom liked this, or it was passed down from my grandparents to my parents and so on and so forth? Was this something that happened to me at school when I was a kid and one of my best friends who I really looked up to said they liked this and so I liked it too? If you can take that aggressive look at your past, then you can reconcile the present and the revolution that is occurring within your relationship to the material. Like, I think about this a lot in terms of sports. Like, growing up, I was a huge 49er fan. Huge. They were a really successful team when I was a kid. I recorded every Super Bowl they were in. I had the entire newspaper of the San Francisco Chronicle the day after every Super Bowl they won. Why? Why do they care so much? Well, my dad was a fan. Not as big a fan as me, but my godfather was a huge fan. He had an entire room in his house dedicated to 49er memorabilia. And that's why I love them. Is my connection to my elders. And then as I grew older, and my godfather died, and my father died, and then I'm like, do I really care about this team? I don't own this team. I don't like some of the decisions the team is making. It's just causing stress and pain in my life, with some joy here and there, but I'm finding myself getting really emotionally involved and frustrated in something that I have literally no control over. And there's very little that I have control over anyway, so I might as well just focus on what I can move the needle on in my life. And that was a revolution of my values. Now that happened long before Uranus transited into Taurus, but I imagine when that was happening, I have to go back and look that there was some sort of transits that were occurring in my life that brought that change into fruition. So there's a lot of work of delving into the deep to reconcile how you have come to terms with your self-worth and your values. Venus, transiting through Pisces, we mentioned earlier, forms a trine, a supportive water-water aspect with Mars retrograde in Cancer. This is occurring from January 24th to the 27th, Thursday to Monday, with the exact trine occurring on Saturday, January 25th. This is a beautiful aspect. And I'm so happy I'm going to be at a wedding on this day, because this is a beautiful aspect of kindness, of nurturing, of compassion, empathy. Hopefully Venus in this exalted position is going to soothe that Martian energy in Cancer. It's going to help us take a compassionate look at our past and our relationships of the past. It's going to help us nurture those parts of ourselves that feel guilty, shameful, regretful, or blaming ourselves or those that we're in relationship with. It's going to help us nurture that with some love, some compassion, some empathy, some courage. Mars is not just the god of war, the planet of aggression, conflict. It's also confidence, courage, and courage stems from love. Courage stems from love. Mel Gibson was talking about meeting with these tier 1 individuals like Navy SEALs or SAS operators, and they were telling that to him their different stories of heroism and the chaotic situations they had been in, and he was just marveling at their total disregard for self and wanting to put themselves in harm's way to protect and save others. But I kind of look at it a different way. It's like Mel Gibson was talking about. He said multiple times how he's a flawed individual. I want to be like, Mel, no, you're not. You're perfect. You're perfect. Now, does that mean you're perfect in the way that you view Jesus Christ? No. But you are a creation of God. And you can't say that God created something that is imperfect and flawed. Would you say that God created a flawed being? No. Everything is divine. So those moments where you have fallen short of what the Bible tells you should do, that doesn't make you flawed. It makes you an instrument that is teaching the people that you have that experience with something about themselves that they could only learn through their interaction with you, just as you could only learn about yourself through your interaction with them. And that is divine. So when I think of these tier 1 individuals going out into harm's way, like he talked about this film that he did, Hacksaw Ridge, which is a true story about this individual that was fighting, I think, in World War II, who was a medic, had no weapon, and ran into battle hundreds of times to drag wounded people off the battlefield and to save them, to sew them up, to help them live. And he says they have total disregard for themselves. And I say, no. Those people have incredible self-love. They have self-love in a manner that is beyond, because they see evil happening. They see people dying. They see people being threatened, and they can't live with themselves knowing that they stood by and did nothing, because they have too much love for themselves to hide. That's ultimate courage. And it's maybe a little different perspective. But this Venus trine Mars in Cancer, Venus in Pisces trine Mars retrograde in Cancer, Thursday to Monday, with the exact trine on Saturday, January 25th. That's about taking a courageous look at your relationships, taking a courageous look at the past, the origin of your relationships, all your different relationships, all your different lovers, all your different friends, all the way back to your parents, because those are your first relationships. And having compassion for yourself, compassion for those that you're in relationship, and empathy for them as well. That takes courage. But through that courageous act, you'll be able to hopefully heal a part of your psyche with understanding, forgiveness, and love for yourself and those that you were connected to and still are connected to. These healing frequencies continue with Mercury in Capricorn, forming a sextile, a supportive aspect to Neptune in Pisces. This is connecting our conscious reality to our unconscious awareness, to the depths of our psyche, Saturday to Monday, with the exact sextile occurring on Sunday, January 26th. Again, taking responsibility for your thoughts. Taking responsibility for your thoughts. And showing yourself compassion. That yes, I do think this way, or I did do this thing that I regret, that I blame myself for, but I'm going to show myself compassion in this moment. Because the only way I'm going to get to the next moment, and that next moment not be this moment again, is by forgiving myself. What thoughts? What are your thoughts? What goes through your mind when you're cooking, when you're walking down the street, when you're driving your car, when you're lying awake in bed in the middle of the night? What are your thoughts? What is the nature of your thoughts? These few days, Sunday to Monday, really present an opportunity for you to acknowledge your thoughts, take responsibility for what they are, and show yourself compassion in the wake of them. These same days, Saturday to Monday, with the exact sextile occurring the same day as Mercury in Capricorn forming a sextile to Neptune in Pisces. Sunday, January 26th is Mercury in Capricorn forming a sextile to the North Node retrograde in Pisces. So we've got the North Node in Pisces, Neptune in Pisces riding side by side. Neptune's at 27, North Node's at 28. Mercury's hitting both those, boom, boom. Extra compassion, extra empathy. What are your fantasies? What are your dreams? You deserve them. You deserve them. You are a divine vessel. It's here to do great things. If only you believe in yourself. And if you're beating yourself up with guilt, shame, regret, and blame, you don't believe in yourself. And if by me saying that makes you upset at yourself because you're like, damn it, I don't believe in myself. Now you're being hard on yourself still. Damn it, now I'm being hard on myself for being hard on myself. So it's like then you're hard on yourself for being hard on yourself for being hard on yourself. It's gotta stop. Stop it. Stop, stop, stop. I'm a divine being having a human experience. And part of that experience is understanding that I don't always make choices where I look at that and say, yeah, I'd do that again. No, often I make choices where I'm like, I'm never doing that again. Or I don't ever want to do that again. I hope I never do that again. That's where you want to be. You want to be in that spot where you can say, oh, I see that I did that. And I wouldn't do that again. If I can prevent myself from doing that again, I won't do that again. That's where you want to be. By recognizing that you have the ability to make a different choice. But if you are continuing to make the same choice again and again and again, or if you're continuing to have guilt, shame, regret, and blame over making that choice that one time, then you're going to be met with experiences that reflect that experience where you made that choice that hurts your heart. It's like in sports. They tell the athlete, like the baseball player, if you go up to the plate and you're thinking about your last at bat where you struck out, guess what's going to happen? You're going to strike out again. Because you're not present. And you're blaming yourself for striking out. You're angry at yourself for striking out. You're putting yourself down. You deserve compassion. So surround yourself with a community that is compassionate to you, and you show your compassion to that community. Now, the final transit of the week is Venus in Pisces, forming the sextile with Uranus retrograde in Taurus. So as our values and self-worth are being revolutionized, so is our relationships. You're like, I'm starting to find that I'm more compassionate with myself. I'm being more empathetic to others because I've revolutionized my self-worth in a way where I'm really valuing myself more than I did in the past. I recognize that I matter. I mean something. I'm glad I'm here. And other people are glad I'm here. Maybe it's not a lot of people. But it starts with you. It starts with you appreciating yourself for who you are, for what makes you unique. And in that manner, connecting to others and helping them harness their individuality, their uniqueness through compassion and empathy. It really feels like there are so many beautiful aspects this week. There's really just 3 tense aspects out of the 10, maybe 4. There's 2 that are really tense, which is the sun squaring the moon, which is a quick one, but it does linger. And so there may be tension from the weekend moving into the week. And then Mercury squaring Chiron. There's the opposition with Mercury and Mars and the conjunction with the Sun and Pluto, which are intense to a lesser degree. But even including those, the majority of the aspects are very supportive. So you don't want to just rest on your laurels with these supportive aspects. It's like, okay, everything's finally chilled out. Last week was crazy. No, this is the time to really hit it. To go hard, to push yourself, to take advantage of these cosmic frequencies that are supporting you to love yourself more fully and those around you. To really step up in a way that only you can, that is unique to you. And through that, you can manifest your dreams, your fantasies, especially in terms of what you're looking for from relationships, from community. Community that connects through compassion and empathy. Thank you for being a part of our community of the weekly transit. I hope the message that we've shared here with you is supportive and empowering to you through the week ahead. And I'll look forward to reconnecting with you next week. Thank you for listening to the weekly transit. If you're curious to learn how these transits or any other transits may be affecting you, or if you're interested in learning more about your astrological code, contact me for a reading at theweeklytransit.com. This episode was produced by me, Scott Tajarian. Music written by Ben Leinbach from Listen Deep by Amber Herzog Lyman. Wishing you all the best as you ride the planetary waves.